The Inheritance Trap. A story of family betrayal and systematic revenge. She spent 15 years caring for her dying mother, while her siblings lived their glamorous lives. When Mom passed, they swooped in like vultures to claim the inheritance she'd earned through sacrifice. But they had no idea she'd been planning their destruction for months, and Mom was in on it. Welcome back to Consequences and Co. ***, where family loyalty means everything until greed destroys it all. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most calculated revenge stories I've ever encountered. This is about Rebecca Torres, a woman who gave up her career, her social life, and 15 years of her life caring for her ailing mother, only to watch her selfish siblings try to steal everything when Mom died. But Rebecca had learned patience from years of caregiving, and she was about to teach her family that some betrayals come with a very steep price. If you're here for stories where the good guys win and greedy family members get exactly what they deserve, smash that like button and let's watch karma work its magic. Chapter 1. The Caregiver's Sacrifice. Rebecca Torres was 28 when her mother Alina was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. While her older siblings, Marcus, Isabella, and Diego, were building their careers in different cities, Rebecca made a decision that would define the next 15 years of her life. She moved back home to care for their mother. "You don't have to do this alone, Becca," Marcus had said during a family conference call. "We can hire professional caregivers. You have your own life to live." But Rebecca knew the truth that her siblings couldn't accept. Their mother needed family, not strangers. Alina Torres had immigrated from Mexico with nothing, worked 2 jobs to put all 4 children through college, and deserved better than being warehoused in a facility while her family pursued their ambitions. "I'll handle it," Rebecca had said simply. "Mom took care of us, now it's my turn." Marcus, a successful investment banker in New York, had seemed relieved. Isabella, a high-powered attorney in Los Angeles, had immediately started talking about tax implications and power of attorney paperwork. Diego, a surgeon in Chicago, had offered to consult on medical decisions, but made it clear he was too busy for day-to-day care. So Rebecca became the sole caregiver, watching her vibrant, intelligent mother slowly disappear into the fog of dementia. She quit her job as a high school teacher, moved into the family home, and dedicated her life to making Alina's final years as comfortable and dignified as possible. The sacrifice was enormous. Rebecca's friends moved on without her. Her romantic relationships withered under the constant demands of caregiving. Her career stagnated while her siblings soared. She watched from the sidelines as Marcus bought a penthouse, Isabella made partner at her firm, and Diego opened his own practice. Her siblings visited occasionally, Marcus at Christmas, Isabella for Easter, Diego during medical conferences in the area. They'd breeze in for a weekend, take photos with Alina for social media, then disappear back to their important lives while Rebecca handled everything else. "You're so good with her," Isabella would say, watching Rebecca patiently feed their mother or help her with basic tasks. "I don't know how you do it." Rebecca would smile and nod, but she was mentally nodding every missed visit, every broken promise, every time her siblings chose their careers over their mother. What her family didn't know was that Alina still had moments of perfect clarity, and during those moments, she was watching too. Chapter 2. The Mother's Awakening. Alina Torres might have been losing her memory, but she wasn't losing her judgment. During her lucid intervals, which became more frequent in the early mornings, she watched her youngest daughter sacrifice everything while her other children treated their mother like an obligation to be managed from a distance. "Mija," Alina said to Rebecca one quiet morning as they sat in the garden, "your brothers and sister, they think I don't see what's happening." Rebecca looked up from the photo albums they'd been reviewing, part of Alina's memory therapy. Her mother's eyes were sharp and focused, a reminder of the brilliant woman who'd built a successful catering business from nothing. "What do you mean, Mama?" "I see how they treat you, like the servant who cleans up their messes. They think because I'm sick, I'm stupid." Alina's voice carried the steel that had intimidated Rebecca's childhood friends. But I remember everything that matters. Over the following months, during Alina's clear moments, mother and daughter began planning what would become the most elaborate family revenge in their community's history. Alina had accumulated significant wealth over her lifetime. The catering business, real estate investments, and careful savings had created an estate worth nearly $2 million. Her other children assumed they'd inherit equal shares, with Rebecca getting some extra compensation for her caregiving. They were catastrophically wrong. Alina began working with her lawyer, the same man who'd handled her business affairs for 30 years, to completely restructure her will. But this wasn't just about changing inheritance percentages. Alina and Rebecca were crafting a systematic plan to expose every one of her other children's worst traits while teaching them the true cost of taking family loyalty for granted. "They want to inherit what I built," Alina told Rebecca during one of their planning sessions. "Let's make sure they earn it." The plan they developed was diabolical in its complexity and perfectly justified by years of neglect and entitlement. Chapter 3, The Siblings' True Colors. As Alina's condition appeared to worsen, her other children began showing their true priorities. Marcus started asking pointed questions about estate planning. Isabella offered to help by reviewing all legal documents. Diego suggested moving Alina to a better facility where she'd receive professional care. All three siblings suddenly became very interested in their mother's finances. "I think we need to discuss Mom's long-term care options," Marcus announced during a rare family gathering. "Rebecca, you've been amazing, but this is getting beyond what one person can handle." Rebecca watched her siblings carefully. Marcus kept checking his phone during their mother's confused moments. Isabella grew impatient when Alina repeated stories. Diego talked about Alina like she wasn't in the room. "I can handle it," Rebecca said quietly. "Mom wants to stay home." "But is that really what's best for her?" Isabella pressed. "There are excellent facilities that specialize in Alzheimer's care. She'd have professional support, medical monitoring, social activities." "You mean warehouses where you can forget about her," Rebecca said, her voice steady but her eyes flashing. "That's not fair," Diego interjected. "We're thinking about quality of life. Mom deserves the best care possible." "Where were you thinking about her quality of life when she was first diagnosed? When she needed family support most? When she was scared and confused and calling for her children?" Rebecca's composure finally cracked. "I was here. Every night, every crisis, every moment of fear and confusion. Where were you?" The room fell silent. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Isabella's jaw tightened. Diego stared at his hands. "We all have our own lives, Rebecca," Isabella said finally. "Some of us have responsibilities that prevent us from." "From what? Caring about the woman who sacrificed everything to raise us." If this family dynamic is hitting close to home, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been the one doing all the work while family members reap the benefits? Make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to take a turn that will blow your mind. But Rebecca's outburst was calculated. Alina, sitting quietly in her chair, was recording everything with perfect mental clarity. Every dismissive comment, every selfish justification, every moment of her other children treating their mother like a burden to be managed. The ammunition for their revenge was being handed to them on a silver platter. Chapter 4, The Setup. As Alina's condition appeared to deteriorate, her other children became increasingly focused on practical matters, which is to say, financial matters. Marcus started sending Rebecca articles about estate tax planning. Isabella offered to review their mother's will just to make sure everything is in order. Diego began asking questions about life insurance policies and retirement accounts. None of them noticed that Alina's confusion followed suspicious patterns. She was sharp during conversations with Rebecca, but vague when her other children called. She remembered every detail about her finances when meeting with her lawyer, but couldn't recall her grandchildren's names when Marcus visited. Alina and Rebecca used this perfectly orchestrated deception to gather intelligence about her other children's true motivations. They recorded phone calls, saved text messages, and documented every instance of their siblings treating Alina's illness as an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. The most damning evidence came during a conversation Rebecca secretly recorded between Marcus and Isabella. "Look, I feel bad about Rebecca carrying all this burden, but honestly, it's better this way," Marcus said. "She doesn't have a career to worry about, no husband, no kids. This is probably the most important thing she'll ever do." "I agree," Isabella replied. "And when Mom passes, we can make sure Rebecca gets a good chunk of the inheritance as compensation, maybe an extra 100,000 or something." "Right, she'll be grateful, and we can all move on with our lives. Diego and I were talking. We think we should sell the house immediately and split the proceeds. No point in maintaining property none of us will use." Rebecca listened to her siblings casually dismiss 15 years of sacrifice as convenient labor and planned to essentially tip her for caring about their mother. The conversation was so coldly calculating that even Alina, who'd suspected her other children's selfishness, was shocked by their callousness. "They really think I'm that stupid," Alina said after hearing the recording. "And they think you're that disposable." "Are you ready to show them how wrong they are?" Rebecca asked. Alina's smile was sharp as a blade. "Mija, I've been ready for months." Chapter 5, The Systematic Trap. Alina's will reading was scheduled for 1 week after her funeral, a delay that seemed routine but was actually carefully planned. During that week, Marcus, Isabella, and Diego would unknowingly walk into every trap Alina and Rebecca had spent months preparing. The funeral itself was revealing. All 3 siblings gave beautiful eulogies about their beloved mother and their gratitude for Rebecca's sacrifice. They posted touching tributes on social media, shared photos of their childhood, and accepted condolences from friends who praised them as devoted children. But Rebecca noticed what others missed. Marcus spent most of the viewing period networking with Alina's business contacts. Isabella was on her phone constantly, handling urgent legal matters that couldn't wait for their mother's burial. Diego left early to catch a flight for a medical conference he couldn't reschedule. The week between the funeral and the will reading was a masterclass in revealing true character. Marcus started making calls about real estate appraisals. Isabella researched tax implications of inheritance distributions. Diego contacted financial advisors about investment strategies. Meanwhile, Rebecca quietly implemented the first phase of Alina's revenge plan. She contacted every person her siblings had disappointed during Alina's illness, friends who'd been promised visits that never happened, grandchildren who'd been ignored, business associates who'd been treated rudely during their mother's decline. Rebecca didn't say much, just invited them all to attend the will reading as family friends who meant so much to Mom. She also contacted local news outlets, framing the story as a celebration of immigrant success and family values. Several reporters expressed interest in covering the reading of Alina Torres' will, the successful businesswoman who'd built an empire and raised 4 successful children. By the day of the will reading, Rebecca had assembled an audience of nearly 40 people, including extended family, longtime friends, business associates, and local media. Her siblings were puzzled by the crowd, but assumed it was just Rebecca's way of honoring their mother's memory. They had no idea they were about to become the main attraction in a public humiliation that would destroy their reputations permanently. Chapter 6, The Will Reading Revelation. Attorney James Mendoza had been Alina's lawyer for 35 years and had watched her build her business from a single catering van to a $1 million enterprise. He'd also watched her other children take her success for granted, while Rebecca sacrificed everything to care for her. When Mendoza began reading Alina's will in his packed conference room, his voice carried the weight of a woman's final judgment on her children's character. "I, Alina Torres, being of sound mind and body, do hereby distribute my earthly possessions to reflect the love and care my children have shown me during my final years." Marcus, Isabella, and Diego sat in the front row, looking appropriately solemn while mentally calculating their shares of $2 million divided 3 ways. plus whatever bonus Rebecca would receive. To my son Marcus, who visited me twice in the past year and spent most of that time on his phone conducting business, I leave my collection of family photographs, the only inheritance that requires no effort to maintain and can be enjoyed from a distance. The room went silent. Marcus's face flushed red as people turned to stare at him. To my daughter Isabella, who offered to review my legal documents but never offered to hold my hand during doctor appointments, I leave my law books from night school, a reminder that education without compassion is worthless. Isabella shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. Mom wasn't competent to. Sit down, Mendoza said firmly. Mrs. Torres was examined by 3 independent physicians who certified her mental competency. Every word of this will was carefully considered and legally witnessed. To my son Diego, who offered medical consultations but couldn't find time to have dinner with his dying mother, I leave my collection of medical journals, reading material for all the lonely evenings he chose career over family. Diego's face had gone ashen. Around the room, friends and family members were murmuring, some nodding in recognition of behaviors they'd witnessed. This is where the story gets absolutely incredible. If you're here for this level of family justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think these siblings deserve. But Mendoza wasn't finished reading Alina's final judgments. Chapter 7, The Devastating Truth. The remainder of my estate, including my home, my business, all financial accounts, investments, and personal property, I leave entirely to my daughter Rebecca Torres, who gave up 15 years of her life to ensure I died with dignity, surrounded by love, and never alone. The room erupted. Marcus jumped to his feet, shouting about undue influence. Isabella was already on her phone, probably calling lawyers. Diego sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of their disinheritance sank in. But Alina's will included one more devastating section, a detailed explanation of her decision that Mendoza read over the chaos. I leave everything to Rebecca not because she was my caregiver, but because she was the only one of my children who cared more about my well-being than my wealth. While her siblings visited twice a year and immediately began planning how to divide my assets, Rebecca sat with me through every terrifying moment of losing my memory. I am not punishing Marcus, Isabella, and Diego for having successful careers. I am holding them accountable for having unsuccessful hearts. They treated their dying mother like a burden and their sister like unpaid help, while planning to profit from both my death and Rebecca's sacrifice. Let this will serve as my final lesson to 3 children who forgot the most important thing I ever taught them. Family takes care of family, not because of what they might inherit, but because love requires no reward. The room was completely silent now. The local news reporter was recording everything. Friends and family members looked stunned by Alina's brutal but accurate assessment of her other children's behavior. But Rebecca stood up with one final surprise. "There's more," she announced, pulling out a folder. "For the past 2 years, I've been documenting everything. Every missed visit, every broken promise, every time you treated Mom like an inconvenience." She began distributing copies of text messages, voicemail transcripts, and recorded conversations, including the damning discussion between Marcus and Isabella about Rebecca being disposable, and their plans to move on with their lives after Alina's death. Chapter 8, The Complete Destruction. The evidence Rebecca presented painted a devastating picture of 3 successful professionals who'd systematically neglected their dying mother, while their sister sacrificed everything to care for her. But worse than the neglect was the callous calculation, the way they'd treated Alina's illness as an inconvenience and Rebecca's dedication as convenient free labor. The recorded conversation between Marcus and Isabella was particularly damaging. "She doesn't have a career to worry about, no husband, no kids. This is probably the most important thing she'll ever do." Hearing his own words played back in front of 40 people, including his own teenage children, Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. But Rebecca wasn't finished. She'd also compiled financial records, showing how her siblings had prospered during Alina's illness. Marcus had purchased a vacation home in the Hamptons during the same period. He claimed he couldn't afford to visit their mother more often. Isabella had spent more on her daughter's Sweet 16 party than Alina's entire annual medical care budget. Diego had bought a new BMW while complaining about the financial burden of their mother's medications. "While I was giving up my career to care for Mom," Rebecca announced to the room, "Marcus was buying luxury real estate. While I was sleeping in a chair next to Mom's bed during her worst nights, Isabella was throwing parties that cost more than most people make in a year. While I was sacrificing everything to ensure Mom never felt alone or forgotten, Diego was accumulating toys and trophies to show off his success." The contrast was stark and damning. 3 children who'd had every advantage and chose to use those advantages to avoid responsibility, while their sister gave up everything to honor their mother's sacrifice. The local news coverage was devastating. The story of Alina Torres, successful immigrant businesswoman whose own children abandoned her in her final years, went viral on social media. Video clips of the will reading showed Marcus, Isabella, and Diego's shocked faces as their mother's final judgment was read publicly. But the social media destruction was just the beginning of their consequences. Chapter 9, The Ripple Effects. The public humiliation from Alina's will reading destroyed her other children's carefully constructed reputations in ways that money couldn't fix. Marcus's investment firm, built on relationships with wealthy Latino families who valued tradition and family loyalty, began losing clients immediately. The video of him being disinherited for neglecting his dying mother spread through social networks like wildfire. Within a month, his firm had lost over 60% of its client base. His partners, facing financial ruin by association, forced him out of the company he'd helped build. Isabella's law practice suffered even more dramatic consequences. Her specialty was family law, divorce, custody, and inheritance cases, where her reputation for fighting for families had been her greatest asset. But prospective clients who saw the news coverage couldn't trust a lawyer who'd abandoned her own dying mother. Bar Association colleagues, many of whom had immigrant parents themselves, quietly stopped referring cases to her. Within 6 months, Isabella had to close her practice and take a job at a large firm where she became just another attorney instead of a celebrated partner. Diego's medical practice faced a different kind of reckoning. His patients, many of them elderly, were horrified to learn that their trusted doctor had essentially abandoned his dying mother. The video of Alina's will reading, where she called him out for offering medical consultations while avoiding actual caregiving, went viral in medical communities. Hospital staff whispered about the doctor who was too busy to care for his own family. Diego's reputation for compassion, essential for any successful physician, was permanently destroyed. But the professional consequences were nothing compared to the personal devastation. Chapter 10, The Personal Reckonings. Before we see how this family betrayal story ends, make sure you're subscribed to Consequences and Co. for more tailies where selfish family members get exactly what they deserve. This ending is going to restore your faith in justice. Marcus's wife, who'd grown up in a close-knit family, was horrified to learn how her husband had treated his dying mother. She'd known about Alina's illness, but had believed Marcus's claims that Rebecca preferred to handle things herself, and that professional caregivers were better equipped for Alina's needs. Learning that Marcus had been lying while his sister sacrificed everything caused irreparable damage to their marriage. "I married someone I thought had character," she told Marcus during their divorce proceedings. "I can't stay married to someone who abandons his dying mother." The divorce was ugly and public, with Marcus's abandoned inheritance becoming a key factor in settlement negotiations. His ex-wife received majority custody of their children, partly based on character evidence from the will reading scandal. Isabella's fiancé, a prominent judge, called off their engagement immediately after the news coverage. In a profession where integrity was paramount, being associated with someone who'd publicly been condemned for abandoning family responsibilities was career suicide. Isabella found herself alone and professionally ruined, with a reputation that followed her everywhere. Diego's consequences were more gradual but equally devastating. His adult children, who'd respected him as a successful surgeon and family man, began questioning everything they thought they knew about their father. His ex-wife, who'd shared custody amicably for years, used the will-reading evidence to successfully petition for full custody of their minor children. He abandoned his own dying mother, she told the family court judge. How can I trust him to prioritize our children's needs when it's inconvenient? Meanwhile, Rebecca was discovering what it felt like to be truly free for the first time in 15 years. Epilogue, Justice and New Beginnings. 2 years after Alina's will-reading destroyed her other children's lives, Rebecca stood in the renovated kitchen of her childhood home, preparing for a very different kind of family gathering. She'd used part of her inheritance to modernize the house while preserving her mother's memory in every room. The dining room where Alina had served thousands of meals was now a bright space where Rebecca hosted monthly dinners for caregivers' support groups. The garden where she'd spent quiet mornings with her mother during Alina's final years had become a memorial space where other families dealing with Alzheimer's could find peace. Rebecca had used Alina's business inheritance to establish the Alina Tours Foundation, providing financial and emotional support for family caregivers who sacrificed their careers to care for aging parents. The foundation also offered legal assistance to families dealing with inheritance disputes, particularly cases where primary caregivers were being exploited by distant relatives. At 43, Rebecca was finally living the life she'd deferred for 15 years. She'd returned to teaching, working with high school students whose immigrant parents reminded her of Alina's strength and determination. She'd also begun dating James, a widowed father whose respect for her sacrifice and dedication felt like discovering what healthy love actually looked like. Her siblings had attempted reconciliation, desperate overtures from people who'd lost everything, and finally understood the cost of their selfishness. Marcus had written a letter claiming he'd learned from his mistakes. Isabella had offered to provide free legal services to the foundation as penance. Diego had suggested he could volunteer medical services for elderly clients. Rebecca's response had been swift and final. You had 15 years to learn from your mistakes while Mom needed you. Your penance is living with the consequences of choosing career over character. And your services aren't needed. I've learned to build my life around people who show up when it matters, not when it benefits them. She'd kept Alina's business contacts, many of whom had become friends and mentors during Rebecca's transition to independence. She'd also maintained relationships with the extended family and community members who'd witnessed Alina's final judgment of her children's character. But most importantly, Rebecca had learned that sometimes the cruelest betrayal can lead to the greatest freedom. Alina's systematic revenge hadn't just punished her other children for their selfishness. It had freed Rebecca from a lifetime of being taken for granted by people who'd never deserved her sacrifice. As Rebecca prepared dinner in her mother's kitchen, surrounded by photos of Alina's vibrant life and meaningful work, she felt something she'd never experienced while her siblings were part of her life. Complete confidence that she was surrounded by people who valued her, respected her, and would show up when she needed them most. Alina Tours had spent her final years teaching her children one last lesson about the true meaning of family. 3 of them had failed that test spectacularly and publicly. But one had passed with honors and inherited not just wealth, but the freedom to build a life worthy of her mother's sacrifices. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful and fulfilled that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Rebecca's story proved that systematic revenge, executed with patience and precision, doesn't just punish the guilty. It liberates the innocent to finally claim the life they deserved all along. The family that had taken her for granted was gone forever. The family she'd chosen to surround herself with, caregivers, educators, community members who understood the value of service over selfishness, would last a lifetime. Alina Tours had kept her most important promise. She'd made sure that the child who'd sacrificed everything would inherit everything, including the wisdom to never again waste her love on people who couldn't recognize its value. Thank you for watching Consequences & Co. This story of family betrayal and systematic revenge shows us that sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who take advantage of our love the deepest. If Rebecca's story of patience, sacrifice, and ultimate justice inspired you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what lesson hit you hardest. Subscribe for more incredible stories where family loyalty is rewarded and selfish betrayal meets its match. Remember, every sacrifice deserves recognition, every betrayal finds its reckoning, and every act of love eventually gets the response it truly deserves. Subscribe now for more stories where the good guys win and karma always finds its target.